What's up, guys? We're going to be hitting on two topics today. First off, who is in the group RC? Second one we'll be talking about is what you need to get racing. First, we'll speak about the in the group RC. This was actually kind of a concept that kind of came to me over the last year. I mentioned in the first video that I did about helping a gentleman who was new to the hobby. I realized there wasn't really any type of one-on-one coaching or mentoring. And even the videos that were out there weren't necessarily geared to the person coming into the hobby that was super green. So that was what I wanted to do within the group. I build kits for people who might just want to learn how to race and not necessarily build. I also build kits for people who just don't have the time to do the building part. And I glue tires for even racers because a lot of people just don't like to glue tires. That is kind of something that I've been doing for several years, but the coaching thing is something I just recently started doing. We just got back to Illinois actually about 3 weeks ago. And I spent the last couple of years in Oklahoma going back to college. And the one thing that I can say is more than racing, I missed being at the track and helping the kids and the new people. We seem to forget that this is what drives this hobby, and what pushes it forward is teaching others to have fun. Because when you're struggling and you're trying to do something new, it's hard to have fun, especially if everybody's just minding their own business, doing their own race stuff, and just ignoring your existence, really. I had that happen to me more than once coming into this hobby. And so I wanted to make sure that that doesn't happen again, and we create a culture of helps, a culture of servant leaders. The best type of leader is one who will step up to do the work to train up new leaders. And that's what I want within the group RC. It's a fun experience being able to see somebody not know anything and then be able to do everything. So that's just kind of like my goal. And the best way to be a coach is to never stop learning. You know, I'm constantly listening to podcasts, watching build videos, watching tutorials. And I read the manuals to build a kit before I even touch the parts for the kit, just so I'm learning from watching other people do setups, watching other racers, going to big events, and watching the pros do what they do and asking them questions. The best way to move anything forward is to never stop learning, because once you stop learning, you get stagnant in that spot. It's interesting because one thing that we learned in college was no matter where you're at in life, whether it be in a business or in a relationship or in just anything, if you stop where you're at, you actually move backwards and not forwards. The interesting thing about that, everybody's like, no, you just stop where you're at. You do stop where you're at, but the reason you move backwards is because everything around you keeps moving forward. So as things move forward, you're still standing still. It would be as if, especially in this hobby, you know, I just got into this 10 years ago, which some people are like, oh my gosh, that's not that long ago. I've been in this for 30 plus years. But think about where we came in 10 years' time. In 10 years' time, we have come from the Traxxas Slash being a new vehicle. We have come from the B4.1 associated two-wheel drive buggy. We have come from the Losi Triple X to where we are now. Look at where we are now. Everything is different. Everything acts different. We have, you know, brushless isn't just for the rich anymore. Lipos aren't 3000 milliamp 40C lipo for $300. You can get those for like $40 now, if that. Everything has progressed so far forward that what we used to look at as only the pros could get, the average Joe can now get. Our kits have become so much more innovative and they do so much more things. There is far more tuning on these now than there has ever been that I can remember. And it's very interesting because if I had stopped when I first started getting into competitive racing, I would be running a SC10 factory team and a B4.2 factory team, and I would have stopped there. Everybody would be like, you're so behind the times, you've went backward, because everything else progresses forward. Because I wouldn't have continued to learn, I would have not been able to further other people. So the trick to coaching and teaching is you always have to be one step ahead. Oh, if something new is coming out, you're researching it before it's even released. There's a new business concept or new model coming out, you're looking at it before it's implemented. And by doing this, you are creating an environment where it is safe to change. People feel comfortable with that change, and they're okay with following you into that change. A person who's, let's say they're just getting into the hobby. They went and bought $250 Traxxas Slash two-wheel drive, brushed, ready to run with a nickel metal battery and wall charger. If you're not ready to help them change and understand why getting an SC6, if you're not willing to take the time to show them, because you have learned what the difference is between their Slash and the race truck and why it would benefit them to move into that once they want to start getting competitive, then they won't understand and they won't want to do the change. It's very, very important that we learn something so well that we're able to explain it. And it's not just in RC, that's in every part of our lives. That's just something that we have to do in life. We have to continually learn. It's just a form of humility in all reality. And a humble leader is a leader that you want to follow. I mean, how many times have we had an arrogant leader, whether it be at a job or in a church function or in even a friendship, and we don't want to follow that person because they're just walking in arrogance. That is the kind of environment that I want to set and push forward with in the group RC. I just want to help this hobby grow. I love this hobby. This hobby is my passion. This hobby to me is more than just a hobby or a sport. It's a lifestyle. There is so much about this that I love. I love the closeness it's brought to my family. I love the closeness that it has brought in friendships and the opportunities to see the whole United States. There's just so many things that this sport does for people. It opens doors that you would not have thought would be open. My goal is to use this platform as a way to help move this forward so that others can also. I mentioned in my first video, I kind of went on a little bit of a rant about sponsored drivers, and I'm just going to briefly touch on it here real quick again, in case you didn't see the first video, since it was how-tos for like a new guy. A sponsored driver has an obligation to help the new guy. I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. If you're not willing to put a step forward to help the new guy, then you're not doing your job as a sponsored driver, because everybody looks up to you, whether you're a low-level sponsored driver or a premier sponsored driver and traveling the IFMAR circuit. It's just a part of it. It doesn't matter if you're in RC racing or in some other sport or hobby or other type of racing. If you're sponsored in that aspect, you're considered looked up to. Look at Shaun White. How many people looked up to Shaun White when he was 15 years old, wasn't even on X Games or Warped Tour yet? He was just a low-level, just got sponsored running just regional events. A lot of kids looked up to him. He was still being looked up to by kids in elementary school because he was a sponsor getting ready to start a career. He put in the time, he put in the work, and most of all, one thing that I've read about him is he was always willing to teach the youngers. He was always there to help guide them forward, help them learn new things, and step into the next direction of their life. So that's kind of something that I feel like we really need to do. And on that, I would like to transition to part 2 of this video, which is, what do you need to start racing? Now for this, I'm actually going to go into minor detail, but I'm going to go into detail enough that you know what you need to start competitively racing, not just grabbing a Traxxas Slash and going out to the track, but actually competitively racing. And I'm going to go with the car I've got sitting here on my counter because I don't have anything else here at the moment. This Team Associated B6.2D. By the end of this year, I may actually have this available as a rent-a-ride. I actually am now driving for S-Works, so I'm really excited about that opportunity. I just have to get cars. So let's just jump into this here, talk about what we need to get going. First and foremost, we need a chassis, which again, B6.2D. For those of you who are kind of getting new into the racing concept, in racing cars, it's just a chassis. No electronics, no wheels and tires. One thing that I always suggest to people is to go ahead and get tungsten carbide diff balls. It will just help save you from having to tear down and rebuild shortly into the future, especially if it's your first build. You want to go ahead and put the harder stuff in there right away. Let's go ahead and take the body off and look underneath. Underneath the body, we have all the electronics. We have a steering servo. I am using a Savix steering servo right here. I actually really like the Savix coreless servos. I think that they're amazing. They're a huge bang for the buck. No, I'm not sponsored by Savix. Savix, if you see this, I would love to drive for you guys. I've been using your servos for years. I swear by these servos. Next up, we've got your speed controller. I've actually used to run a lot of hobby wing stuff, and I started really liking the Reedy speed controllers and Reedy motors specifically for two-wheel drive buggy. I still really like hobby wing for 8 scale. You need your receiver, and you need a motor. I actually put a motor fan on here as well. There's my motor fan. Reason being, because some of these get a little warm, depending on how turny the track is and how hard you're getting on it. This has an 8.5 turn motor in it. For those of you who are newer, the lower the turn, the faster the motor. The lower the turn number is, the higher the kV rating is. So if you're used to seeing Castle stuff that says it's like 4,500 and 5,700 and what is it, 7,500 kV or 6,600 or something like that. Every time you go up in kV, it's down in turns. When I started out in two-wheel drive buggy, I ran with a 10.5 because I felt like the 10.5 was just a lot easier to control getting into this particular class. I wasn't fast, I wasn't up front, but it got me used to driving something that was so nimble, coming from a big body short course truck. I ran the rear motor short course trucks. They drive totally different. Granted, again, this was 10 years ago. The aluminum chassis cars were just starting to come out. That is what you need as far as the car goes. And then of course your 2-cell battery. Depending on vehicle type that you have, you might need to have a 2-cell shorty like this one has, or a 2-cell stick pack. Most things anymore are going to take shorty packs. Some of them will use stick packs. Most things are going to use shorty packs. So that's kind of just an overview of what you're going to need in the car, and then a body, of course. Now, I have this body, and then if you watched my first video, you saw this body. I always spray bomb, in other words, I solid color, a bright yellow practice body because I only run this in the races. I would not run this body in practice in case it gets damaged because you've got different types of vehicles out on the track at the same time. It's not just all two-wheel drive buggies. You'll have short course trucks and 8-scale buggies and whatnot out there running, especially 8-scale buggies, because those can hurt pretty bad when you're just practicing. Always have a practice body on hand to leave on your car during practice time just to keep it from getting torn up. One thing that I always suggest is tire gluing bands. They also make awesome bracelets, but tire gluing bands, whether they're Sticky Kicks, aka J Concepts, Proline, I don't care where you get them at. I'm always biased as to tire gluing bands are a must and will make gluing tires your first time so much easier, because it helps so much with keeping that seated in the groove, seating that rubber in the groove of the rim. The other thing you'll need, this is something that a lot of people don't realize, is this $100 tiny little thing. I mean, look how big it is compared to my thumb. This little chip is called a transponder. They're made by a company called MyLaps. So something kind of cool about MyLaps that not a lot of guys know, they think that a lot of the newer guys are like, oh, MyLaps just has a market, that's why they're charging $100 for these, and they're the only ones in RC that are making them. MyLaps is the only one in racing that makes a good transponder. There is other transponders. Most of them are infrared. MyLaps makes, how do I say this? MyLaps is the transponders for F1. If I can trust them to put, granted it's a bigger, more fancy version of this that has all kinds of stuff. If I can trust them to put this in an F1 car, I'm really going to trust them to put it in an RC car. That's why I will only ever buy MyLaps transponders, and I will not race at a track that does not use MyLaps transponders, because the others are too inaccurate. They don't work as well. I understand trying to cut corners and cut costs. Personally, I find not running MyLaps transponders to cause more issues down the road. I used to be a race director. I don't like running anything but MyLaps, or a MyLaps system that can run the old A&Bs. A&B was like MyLaps before MyLaps. You don't really see those anymore. They're huge. They're like giant blocks that you put in your car, and they add a ton of weight, and you have to stick them through your body, and they literally raise the roll center like an insane amount. Transponder, though, you have to have these. It tells the race director where you're at on the track, what your lap times are, your distance between the car in front of you and the car behind you. The cool thing about it is after 2 laps, you can see what the pace of the car is. So if you're running a 5-minute race, you're running 30-second laps or whatever, I can see that you're, on a 10-lap pace or a 20-lap pace or whatever. It wouldn't be 20, but you know what I mean. I can't math today. The other thing is radios. That's the back of it. Let's look at the front of it. There we go. I personally prefer Futaba. That is really dusty. That's what I get for having my stuff out on the shelf and not in a bag. Let's just get that cleaned up there. Bit shine. Futaba, again, not a sponsorship. I've run other things. Airtronics I like. Futaba I like. Airtronics is just a little more pricey. As far as receivers go, radios, they're cheaper. You can get a top of the line Futaba for like $800, but you can get good receivers for $50. Whereas Airtronics, I think their good receivers are around 80 or 90. But I really like Futaba. I would love to have a 7PX. I just can't afford one right now. So right now, I'm running the 4PM. The nice thing about these is I feel like they're very ergonomic. They've got the nice wheels in them, adjustable springs and trigger and steering, adjustable trigger position so that depending on if you have hands that are out here, you can move the trigger forward. Nice backlit display, all your telemetry controls on there. You can adjust everything in there, all really easy. One thing that I really like that they started doing a while back is this trigger right here. Now if you're running nitro and you're trying to practice and you're like, okay, I want to go 8.5 minutes on a tank of fuel, you can set this button for a down timer. And as soon as you fuel up and you go, you can hit that button and it will start a countdown of however long you set it for. And you can run 8.5 minutes and it will beep at you or vibrate depending on which model it is. It might do both. And then you'll know you need to come in for fuel. You watch pro guys on TV, you watch live RC, and you're like, wow, these guys are running like 2.5, 3.5 second pit stops. Starting out, your pit stops are going to be 9 or 10 seconds. Your pit person's not going to be a pro person. You're not going to come flying into the pits at full speed. It's going to be a slow go. Pardon me for a moment. You ever get a tickle in your throat? Okay, as I was saying, make sure that you have a decent radio. I think it's done now. Let's see if it's done. A radio is everything. A decent radio will give you expo adjustments so you can set a bit of a softness to your throttle or your steering, and a whole bunch of other stuff. One thing I really like about Futaba, their entire manual's in English. It's well laid out. It's probably one of the best manuals out in the market. You'll need all that and a battery charger. If you build your own kit, you'll need all the tools that I talked about in the tool video, and that'll get you going. That is a great starting point for racing. If you're running just one class, it's a little easier. You don't have to get, if you're running 8 scale, you do need a 17mm wheel range. I forgot about that. Just remember, when you're on the track, slow is fast. You need to go slow at first to get faster. If you drive slow, you keep it down, you make it around the track without ever having to have a turn marshal flip your car, you will get faster and faster and faster. I have watched guys who have slowed down and not had to get marshal, and they're like, wow, I got 2 more laps in than my last race. It's like, yeah, because you weren't on your lid the whole time. As you go out and race, remember the golden rule: rubber side down, shiny side up. Have a great day, and we'll see you in the next one.